Hello. In these strange times where many of us are isolated and asked to stay at home, art can be a window into another reality or another way of thinking. I think often that we underestimate how much our imagination is something that needs to be stimulated through the imagination of other people. And artists are some of the most imaginative citizens we have in our community. So it seems a nice opportunity as an art museum, as Vanabbemuseum, to introduce a few of the works in our collection with a view to thinking about isolation and what it can lead to in a positive as well as undoubtedly the negative sense that it has today. And one work that I'd like to mention in this regard is a work by a Polish artist called Sasnal. And it's a work which is called Untitled Chapter in brackets. I think it's a work which talks both about the need in a way for a certain isolation or a certain peculiarity in each of us as individuals in order to try and devise a world to come, in a way to imagine the world otherwise than it is, in order to eventually create that different world. It's a work which refers to a Polish predecessor of Sasnal, Andrzej Wróblewski. He was an artist who died very young in 1957, having gone through the Second World War. And a lot of his work was related to the trauma of that period and how he might try, through his painting, to come to terms with the Polish past, with the Holocaust, with the occupation, and with the subsequent history of the People's Republic of Poland. I think what's interesting about this image is that you see, in a sense, what I like to call a man with a plan and a small plastic bag, standing on what I project actually as a station platform. It could be somewhere else. That's simply what, in my imagination, it speaks to. Somebody who's about to set off, about to travel, perhaps about to go to a meeting, perhaps about to present his ideas as they're written on that rolled up blueprint or drawing, to a committee, to some kind of forum that will judge whether his imagination, whether his ideas are good enough to be implemented in a certain way. That's how I project onto this image. But I also project a lonely, or at least a figure alone. He's alone in this background, but also alone in the sense that his ideas are maybe not part of the time, are not necessarily those that are going to be adopted immediately or celebrated by the marketeers or the commercial companies that are going to try and instrumentalize them. Rather, it feels to me in this stance and in his clothes, in his slightly drab feeling, you certainly have a sense of maybe that post-Second World War period in Europe, but also you have a sense of somebody who's a little bit out of time, neither in his own time, the time perhaps of Wróblewski in the 1940s and 50s, nor in our own time of the early, mid almost 21st century. And what I think is remarkable about this image is that you can project onto this figure who has his back to you so many of your own characteristics of what it is to have a desire, have a plan, have a sense of destiny perhaps, of where you want to go to, and how much that can be both incredibly transformative for your life, but also can be isolating, can create the conditions where you're not necessarily the most popular in your community. And I don't see this figure that we have before us as being particularly popular in that sense, or particularly somebody who wants to be liked, but more that he wants to try and deliver something that he feels is important. Now, of course, all that is very much projected onto this image. Yeah? It's my imagination meeting Sasnal's imagination. And I think that's the point about an experience of an artwork in general. Whatever the context is that the artist gives you, whatever the context is that the museum gives you, you can always liberate yourself from those contexts. They might be very interesting, they might be very stimulating. Sasnal gives me this image in order to allow my imagination to work with his. Without that image, I could never quite have this sense of both purpose and loneliness, which is conjured up by this painting. But in having the image, I can then make it my own, and in a sense identify with that image, perhaps as myself, perhaps as somebody that I know and somebody that I respect, but also see the struggle that's in that sense of having a destiny which is not necessarily shared by your community. And I think in this painting, maybe we can see something of the possibility that that being alone, that being isolated, that being locked down as we are today, might offer. That somehow looking at this is not a happy image. It's not an image which would be instrumentalizing in a way this terrible virus for better ends. But at the same time, it offers us a way of using the misfortune that we're suffering today to try and think about the day after tomorrow, and what are the kinds of plans that we'd like to see represented on that rolled up piece of newspaper. Can we make the world a different world from the one that we came from? Is this virus going to mark a transformation that I think many of us have hoped for, away from the kinds of value system of relentless competition and aggressive marketing and aggressive capital exchange that we've had over the last 30 years, really since 1989. Can this moment represent something that in all its terribleness can produce something good? And I think that looking at Sasnal's painting is a way for me, and I hope for you when you see it digitally now and hopefully in the museum in the future, is a way for you also to think about what that future might represent. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks a lot.